Well, hello, Internet. Today I'm going to do something a little bit crazy. I'm going to try to teach pretty much everything there is to know about CSS3 in one video. So I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, so in the description underneath the video, you're going to find links to all of the different parts of this tutorial, as well as a link to all of the code or HTML, CSS that you will find here. And on the left side of the screen, I have Sublime Text. On the right side, I have Google Chrome. I'm going to be referring to two different websites throughout this tutorial. One is this Wikipedia page right here, which is going to provide us with all the hexadecimal codes for a whole ton of different colors. So there is that link, and I'll put that in the description as well. And also you're going to see here the easy way for us to validate to make sure that our style sheets are all compliant, and there is the link for that. So what I did was I went ahead and created all of the HTML, which you can see right here, and then I'm going to jump over and create all the style sheets to edit it so that you can see everything as it happens. The very first thing I'm going to do is open up heading.css, and inside of this heading I'm going to define an h1 tag style as well as an h2 tag style, and that is how you can style two things at one time. And I'm just going to change the text color here to white. That's how we change our text color. And I'm going to change the background color behind all of this to black. And then I'm going to throw on some padding all the way around this guy of 15 pixels. And then I'm going to open up paragraph.css, and I'm just going to say that all of my paragraphs are going to have the default styling to have text color of blue. Now what I'm going to be able to do is go into my main style.css and import both of those styles that I created right there. Now whenever you're dealing with imports, anytime you want to use them, they must be the very first thing in your style sheet. And I'm just going to come in here and go import and type in the names for those style sheets that I just created just a second ago, and then import again, and this is going to be paragraph this time .css. And since I have the main style sheet right here defined as my default style sheet, and this is how we would be able to link to outside style sheets. I'm not going to get into inlining style sheets because that should be avoided at all costs. I'm going to put in my semicolons after my import statement, save that, and reload. And you're going to see all the different things that changed here. Text changed to white, and here you're going to see for this other heading tag that has changed to white and the background changed to black. Also, if we come down here, we can see that our paragraphs all changed to blue based off of our defining that right there. So if you want to focus in and change everything across the entire document, you're just going to put in a star. And let's say that I want to define my font family. This is how you would define your fonts. And let's say I want my default font across everything to be Arial Black. I would put that inside of quotes. Anytime we have spaces inside of font names, we're going to put them inside of quotes. And then we're going to define other defaults font-wise that may exist if the first font that we define does not show up. And we can save that, reload, and you're going to see all the fonts change right there, everywhere. That's what the star does for us. If I instead just wanted to change everything that lies inside of a div, let's just copy font family, and we'll just type this, and then font family. And let's say anything inside of a div I want to be Comic Sans. Type in Comic Sans. MS, make sure you close that off with that quote, and then I could do anything. It doesn't have to follow any real guidelines, just whatever I put inside of here. And whenever you only have one statement in here, you can either put the semicolon in or leave it out. I'm going to leave it in there and reload, and now you're going to see that this right here lies inside of a div, so all of those links all of a sudden, as well as everything down here, is all going to be changed to Comic Sans. If I flip over to the HTML here for a second, and we come down here, we can see here we defined a class for this link right here. And if we want to focus in and change styling just on classes, we're going to type in a period and then the name of said class. So that was site link. And let's just stick to the old font family guy. And let's say that we want the default to be Georgia or serif. That's how we can define that, and reload. And you're going to see that changed right there. And as we make changes in the style sheet, anything that overrides what is up here is going to override it. So it's going to continue to cascade down and change as things go on. And that's pretty much where the term cascading comes from. If I wanted to come in here and change the Tony quote, in this situation, this does not have a class, but it has an ID, as you can see right here, ID. If I want to focus in and change styling on an ID, I put a hash symbol in, and then Tony quote, right like this. And I could change the font family on this. Let's say I want to do Lucidia Sans Unicode or Lucidia Grand and then Sans Serif. I can do that. make sure we go and put a semicolon here at the end because we're going to make multiple changes here. And let's say that I want the color of this guy to be black. I can do that. And you can see it changed. If I wanted to go in and change site links or classes named site links only inside of paragraphs, I would type in P for the paragraphs and then site link. And I could come in and change my font family again. I'm on purpose making all these font names different just so you can see the most common types of fonts that you're going to be able to use right out of the box on any browser. And there's Book Antiqua, Palatino, or Serif. And then let's say that I want to have my default color be black. Reload, and now you can see right here, this font right there changed to Palatino Linotype. And if we flip over here, come down here, you can see this has a class name of sitelink, and it's a paragraph. So that's the reason that that changed, and the other ones did not. Likewise, let's say that I wanted to come in here and change Tony Robbins. So let's bounce over here. And here we can see Tony Robbins is right here. And it is inside of a span that has the ID of Tony name. Well, how are we going to target IDs? Well, we're going to use a hash symbol. And then if we want to specifically target this span, we're going to come over here. We're going to say span. We want to target any span on the screen with the ID of Tony name. And we'll be able to go in there and change that. And let's change the font family again, Times New Roman, which I'm sure you've seen before. And as this continues, we're going to get into crazier things. I just want to start off with the simple things here first. And there's Times and there's Serif once again. And then just to make that stand out a little bit better, let's change that to blue. And now you can see Tony Robbins' name changed right there. Now let's say we wanted to target an ID of tutorials. Let's come over here and look at this. There's an ID for tutorials. And then we wanted to specifically target ordered lists right there and items in those ordered lists. Well, we would go tutorials because that is an ID, and then ordered list, and then list items. Now we'll be able to come in there and change those to purple, and you can see they're purple now. I could also go in and target the unordered list, these guys right here, by doing likewise, tutorials, unordered list, list items, and let's give those the text color of green just to make those stand out a little bit different. And now they're green. Now let's say I want to do something a little bit weirder, like I want to target this paragraph that's right here that follows the favorite video games right here that's inside of an H3 tag. So let's bounce over and look at that. Here's an H3 tag, and I want to target the paragraph that comes immediately after it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go H3 plus paragraph. And let's change the font style to this, to italic, and you can see it's now italic. Maybe then let's say that I want to come in here and specifically target this link that follows after the H3 tag and is inside of a paragraph. Well, I'm going to do something quite simple. I'm going to go H3, want to target the paragraph that comes after it, and then I want to target the link that is inside of said paragraph. Red, and now that's red. Just trying to show you all the different ways of targeting things. Let's say that I wanted to target every single paragraph that has a class. There we go. You can go like this, and let's say that I want to change the background color for all those guys to gray. Let's see how many paragraphs I have with a class. Well, there's that one. I guess there's only one of them. And then we could also come in and target specifically paragraphs, I don't know, that have an ID. And let's change the background color for those into yellow. And you can see the Tony quote up here turn yellow. Let's bounce over to the HTML again. Let's say that we want to target anything with the alt of Nintendo. Let's say anything. And then we'll say alt, do this little squiggly, well, make sure it says alt, do our little squiggly, equal to, and then we'll say Nintendo. And we can come in here, change the background to orange. And you can see if I take that semicolon out of there and reload it, it's still going to work. And you can see here how everything's highlighted in orange. So there's a quick rundown of how to target all sorts of different things, and we'll get into more of them as the tutorial continues. Now I'd like to talk about the difference between borders, margins, and paddings. Well, the border is going to be surrounding all of your content, and it is going to be the outside of whatever padding you define. So here's going to be your content, your text, your images, your whatever. Then you're going to have your padding, then you're going to have your border, and then you're going to have your margin. Now let's go in and start playing with those. As you can see, I went in here and created some lorem ipsum text, and I'm going to demonstrate a whole bunch of different font properties and a whole bunch of other different things. So let's jump into the style sheet. What I'm going to really focus in here first off is this paragraph with the ID of lorem, and we're going to play around with margins and paddings and all that different stuff. Now it's an ID, so of course I'm going to type in a hash symbol like this. Now if I wanted to define my padding, I can do it in numerous different ways. As you can see, bottom, right, top, and left all pop up right there. If I wanted to change the padding right on one line, I could say 10 pixels, and that would be at the top, was where I'm going to put my padding. Another 10 pixels is going to be on the right. Another 10 pixels is going to be at the bottom. And another 10 pixels is going to be on the left side of the screen. So it goes in a circle, sort of like a clock. If I, however, would get rid of these, and let's say that I change this to 25 pixels, what that is saying is I want my top to be 10 pixels, I want the right and left to be 25 pixels, and I want the bottom to be 10 pixels. If, however, I change this to just two of these, this is saying that I want my top and bottom to have a padding of 10 pixels and my right and left to have a padding of 25 pixels. Not really necessarily something you need to memorize, but something you can talk about anyway. So, like I said, we could also come in here and do padding top. And let's say I wanted to do 20 pixels for that. I could then come in and do padding bottom like this. And let's say that I also want that to be 25 or 20 pixels. And there we go. There is 20 pixels. And if we reload it, you can see that the padding has indeed changed. It's going to show up a little bit better though whenever we talk about borders. So we might as well just go in here and talk about margins, and then we'll talk about borders. We can define our margins in much the same way as I talked about before. If we have 4 here, the first one's going to define the top, the right, bottom, and left in that specific order. If we have 3, it's going to target the top, right, and left, then bottom. And if I only have 2, it's going to be the top, bottom, and then the left and the right. I'm just going to come in here and define margin like this and say 10 pixels. Why don't we come in and then mess around with our borders. And here I'm going to do something a little bit funkier. Let's say I want to come in and define my border for the top and have it be 5 pixels. That's going to be the border size for the line. I can have it be solid. And then let's go and throw in a hex code. And I showed you where I get all my hex codes. They're from the wiki colors area. And if I reload it, you can see it is a solid blue line. I could then come in and define my border bottom. And you can see you can also come in and define the width of the lines and all that stuff all in separate little tags, but I never do that, and pretty much nobody else ever does otherwise. I could also type in dotted instead of my common solid. Define a left border, and let's make this dashed. And then finally my border right, and have this be 5 pixels and double. That's going to be a double line, and close that off. And there you can see all the different borders over here on the right side of the screen. The other different line types you're going to be able to use is none, dotted, dashed, solid, double, groove, ridge, inset, and outset. And I leave it to you to play around with those. And that leaves us into the background. Remember, we are inside of this paragraph with the idea of lorem. If I wanted to change the background color for that, I can just type in background and then throw in some type of background right like that to keep it very simple. And there it went, just real subtle color. I could also come into the background area and, well, we could leave a color inside of there. I could also type in a URL to an image. So let's say repeat, and then define repeat like this. And reload it, you can see it has like a stone background there, and now the text is completely illegible. We could change the color of the text, of course, to white to see if that changes and makes that look any better. And it does a little bit, but not really. Just pulled that image out there randomly. You could also define how these images would be repeated. So repeat is just going to be repeated to the horizontal level as well as the vertical. You could also type in repeat -x if you just wanted the image to repeat to the horizontal plane. You could type -y if you wanted it to just repeat up and down, or you could type in no repeat. Just make sure that you put the little dash inside of there. Another thing we could do is we could go into the background area and define the position of whatever image is in the background to be either in the left, top, bottom, or right. And this would be in situations in which we are not going to repeat. And I'll get a little bit more into the other different ways we can mess around with the background as the tutorial continues. And I'm just going to go in here and paste in a whole bunch of different font properties. You can see here, font style, font variant, font weight, font size, and all the other different options that are available. There's font height as well. And if I save that and bounce over here, you can see all of them defined, and they all have their own ID. And if I reload it, you're going to see all the different stylings that are available to us. So font style normal is just going to look normal. Then you have italic, then you have oblique, which looks almost identical to italic. Font variant normal, variant small caps, font weight normal, font bold, font bolder, and there's lighter, and there's medium, there's extra, extra small. There's also an extra small, here's small, extra, extra large, large, and there is font size set at 200%. And if you bounce over here and look at the style sheet and come down here, you can see exactly how all of those are defined. Didn't want to spend too much time on them, of course. All of this is available in the description. Now let's bounce in here and take a look at some different ways we can position things. Once again, I have all of the HTML here. We're going to focus in on it. Very first thing I'm going to focus in on here is this parent div. Once again, an ID, so we're going to use a hash symbol, and I'm going to say parent div in the style sheet. And let's say that I want the background color for that div to be changed to that color. And then let's say that I also want to come in and define a border. And let's go in and change this border to 0.1 EM. And I might as well, even though I talked about it in my HTML5 tutorial, why don't I talk about the different unit types that are available to us in CSS. Now basically the different unit types you're going to see all the time is going to either be pixels, points, EMs, or percent. Pixels are normally going to be used whenever you want to represent pixels on a device, just like you would think. Points are mainly going to be used in print media, in which 72 points is going to be roughly equal to 1 inch. You're going to see points all the time with fonts. EM is going to be equal to whatever the current font size is for your document. And percent is going to be the current font size equal to 100%. So whatever the current font size is, the percent is going to be at 100% is going to be equal to that percentage. And as we see these in examples, they're going to make a lot more sense. Another thing that I should cover is the difference between block elements and inline elements. To simplify this greatly, just think of block elements as elements that have a break statement after them. So after they go on your web page, there's going to be a break that's going to jump to the next line. And then inline elements are not going to contain those breaks. And as you can see, block quotes, bodies, breaks, statements, of course, divs, footers, H1 tags, headers, paragraphs, bodies, tables, things that are known for being quite large are all going to be block elements, which once again just means there's going to be a break. While inline elements like links, everybody knows there's links inline inside of paragraphs of other different data and so forth. Font tags, which of course would not cause a line break. Images, which also by default don't cause line breaks, and things that you would expect to show up in the body of your text without going and causing all sorts of other problems like spans are all going to be your inline elements. So your block elements are going to be like big giant boxes, while your inline elements are going to be things that just flow with the rest of the data on your screen. So there you go, covered most of the basics. Now let's say we also want to target the default ID and go and give that a background color as well, like this, and then if we reload, you're going to see exactly how those are changed. Basically just threw a border around them, and if we jump over here, we can see here is the div that I was focusing in on, and I went and gave it a color of gray right here. And then you can see for the default part, which is just this very first part inside of this div, I went and changed the background color to blue. So yes, it's possible to go in and override just parts of different elements inside of other elements. Let's say I also want to come in here and target this ID, centered. Very simple, just go centered. Let's say I want to change the background color to that. And let's say that I want to come in and change the width on that. And here we'll use 50%. And I also want to change the margin to auto, which means it's going to have an equal amount of space on the right and the left. Yes, indeed, I can do that. And you can see here is the width that I defined, which is going to be 50% of the total area that's in the enclosing parent provides for this element, and then it's going to center it thereafter. If I did text align, I could also have centered show up inside of there. And why don't we just do that? Here I'm going to target centered text like this, and then show the difference between text align and center. And reload it, and now you're going to see that that text went and centered itself. And I'm going to come over here and get rid of this and demonstrate absolute positioning. So let's get rid of all this altogether. Basically, absolute positioning is just going to be positioning based on the document itself. So I want to target a div with the name top left position, and let's say I want the background. I can use color as well and change the background color on that, and we can come in and change the border on this as well. And here we're going to position it absolutely, so we have to say that. And then we're going to define our width. Once again, top left position. Come in here and look at it. This is this guy right here, and it is a div that we're going to be positioning absolutely. We come in and define the width of it as well as the height for it. And also we can define the z-index, and the element on your page that has the highest number of set for the z-index is going to be the element that shows up on top. So let's set this to 4. And if we reload that, you can see it shows up right there. Now let's zoom in on the bottom right parent part and reposition that. So that's this guy right here, this div right here that is inside of this div that we just positioned. So if I want to change its positioning, I just go bottom, right, TL, parent. So I'm going to move it to the top left of this parent. How do I do that? Let's change its background color again. Make sure you set the position to absolute again. And then let's say we want it to be in the bottom right-hand corner. Set this to 0 pixels. And if we want it in the bottom right-hand corner, we set that to 0 pixels. And reload it. And boom, you're going to see that it popped down there. Let's say that I then want to also get this div right here, top right position div, and put it in the top right corner inside of my web page. Again, just target it, top right position. And these names mean nothing. They're just names that I pulled out of a hat. And then if I want it to be positioned in the upper right hand corner, I'm going to say top, 0 pixels, and then right. Once again, 0 pixels. Reload, and you're going to see that shows up there, and the Z index is the reason why this shows up on top of this item right here. Then of course I could go and target another div. Let's just copy this. In this situation it is bottom left, TR for top right parent, and then if I want to show up in the bottom left hand corner of that element, I can just do that and reload it. Well, there you can see it's parent, and you can also see how that flows. So it's a little bit messy, but I just wanted to cover that, exactly how absolute positioning works in a real bizarro way. Let's get rid of these guys, and let's talk about fixed positioning. Get rid of all of it. And fixed positioning is going to be positioning that's going to be based off of our browser. So in this situation, I'm going to target this paragraph right here, which is fixed POS. And we can go fixed dash POS. And whether the page scrolls or not, it is going to stay exactly where it is. So let's just make the position fixed on that. If we want it in the top part of the screen, we're going to have to set that to 0. Top left, again, 0. And then if we would go down from there, it would move around on the screen. We could set the width to fill up the whole entire top of the screen by making that 100%. Define a background color for that. We also want to come in and define a border. And then let's throw in a margin of 0 to make sure that it also butts up against the top of the screen, and reload. And you can see I'm staying right here is right there, and whether I scroll it or not, it is not going to move. That's an example of fixed positioning. Talk about relative positioning, which is just going to be positioning an element relative to where it originally was on the screen. And now we're just left with relative 1 and relative 2 with some lorem ipsum here. Let's go in and target those guys. So relative 1, and there you go. There's relative layout 2, and all this other stuff. We're going to reposition all of it. Change the background color on it. Let's change the border on it. Make it black. And give it a height of 100 pixels. Well, let's just go in here and do the same sort of thing for relative 2. And in this situation, we're going to use a positioning of relative. If I want to make it go to 20 pixels to the right of where it originally was, I just type in left and 20 pixels. And then if I want to have it be 30 pixels up or down from its original, if I wanted it to be up from the original, I would say negative 30 pixels. But let's just let that be 30 or like that. Make it go down instead. So it would be 30 down from where it was. Go in and give it a width of 300 pixels. Background color, let's change this to yellow. And get rid of the height. And then look up here to how this is going to change. And there you can see relative 2 went and moved down here. There's relative layout right there. So that is how we're going to relatively move an element based off of where it originally was. This element right here was originally over here in this space right there. Another thing we can do is we can take this little brain image right here and float it to either the left or the right. And let's go in here and look for little brain. There's little brain right here. It's embedded inside of this paragraph tag. So we're going to target it by looking specifically for the source that's right there. And to do that, we can say image with a source equal to little brain ping, and say that we want those to be floated to the left. And then we could also throw in some padding of 10 pixels so that it looks a little bit neat, and reload, and you can see it fit in there real nice. Now let's take a look at clipping, and we're going to be clipping these different brain images over here on the left side or the right side of your screen. You can just see there they are. They're divs with the little images inside of them, very simple. So if we want to come in here and specifically this time we're going to be targeting classes. So you can see all these are classes that we're going to be targeting. So we're going to go div dot little brain clip. This is going to be the very first one. And let's do some positioning absolutely. Define a width on this of 100 pixels. We're going to make the width be a little bit short from what it is. And then if we want to define exactly how we're going to clip this, we're going to draw a rectangle. And we're going to define the top part of it. So we'll say 0 pixels here. So we start at the very top. Then the right, we're going to say we want to clip 50 pixels over, 50 pixels down. Again, it's going to go clockwise, just like always. And then 0 pixels for the left. Then we'll go in and focus on another one of these guys. Little brain, small. And you're also going to see over here, didn't point this out, we're going to be able to define multiple different classes inside of here just by putting class and then inside of the quotes, multiple different class names that we want to be able to edit. So with this guy, we're going to shrink the size of the div so the image isn't going to be able to fit. So let's go in and define our height of 50 pixels. And you can see the brains are slowly disappearing. I'm going to make them come back though. Here I'm going to come in and focus in on overflow visible. And whenever that's set, what this is basically saying is the part of the image that doesn't fit in the div is going to show anyway. So let's go in and do that. Div, overflow, visible. Go top 100 pixels, and then overflow, visible. And there you can see another brain pop back in. Here we can then define an overflow hidden, which is basically going to say that the hidden part isn't going to show. And define our top as 200 pixels, overflow hidden, like this, and reload. And now you can see just part of it shows. And then for the final one, I'm going to show you how scroll works. Basically, it's going to hide everything, but it's going to allow you to scroll. So let's say top, let's set this to 300 pixels, and then have overflow set for scroll, like that. And reload. And now you can see you can scroll through the image even though it doesn't totally appear. So it's something you might not use all the time, but wanted to cover it just to be completionist. Now let's cover some HTML5, things like using header tags and navigation tags and main and sections and all that, and combine that with some CSS3. I'm going to do first here is define some different ways that I want my links to change inside of my documents based off of events. So anytime a link is hovered over, for example, we can say that I want to change my color for that to blue. I could also come in and if it is the active link on our screen, could change the color in that situation to red. And then finally, if it has been visited, we could change the color on that to this grayish color. Another thing that I didn't cover before, if you want to put comments inside of CSS files, just put a / and a star, and whatever your comment is, and close it with a star and a /. If we want to change our body tag background color, do it that quickly, and you're going to see all the colors change there. I do, however, have a div with the name of wrapper, this guy right here. So if I want to focus in and change that so that all the background color behind everything inside of my page is going to actually show up with a value of white, I can do so here. Let's say that I also want this to be automatically centered. I just put auto inside of there for margin for my wrapper. Remember, I wanted to change my background color to white so we can read this a little bit better. And then I can also define my width for my wrapper as well as the height for my wrapper. And now you can see that reloads, and you can also see the background right there. So let's make all this other stuff a little bit neater here. So padding is used so things don't sort of butt up against each other. In the header section, which is where I have my little icon, let's say that I want this to display as a block element instead of a regular inline element like it is. I just type in display block, and then I can come in and decide that I want to put some padding inside of here. Let's just let everything be 0 and say that I want just the bottom padding to be 10 pixels. There you can see that move down. I could then go in and target the website logo that has that ID and go padding once again, 5 pixels. Remember, that's for the top, 0 pixels for the right, 0 pixels for the bottom, and then 5 pixels for the left side of the screen to make that pop off the edge. And there it did. And now let's focus in on the navigation part, which is these guys right here, these links. They have the ID of horizontal nav. So I want them to be displayed as block elements. Throw some padding inside of these guys. So they're going to be basically padding between the different links. 5 pixels bottom and 0 pixels on the left side. And then I'll throw a background color as well of black on those. See how that changed? Now I want to get rid of those underlines and make this a little bit more readable. So if I want to focus in on the underlines, well, the underlines are going to the links, not to horizontal nav. So we have to specifically target the links inside of horizontal nav to get rid of those underlines. Text decoration, change that to none. That's the underline. Let's go in and put a 20 pixels only on the left side of each one of those links so that they don't butt up against each other. There they are. If I want to change and add a hover to those links, again, target the div that surrounds them, and then link hover, and define a new text color for those situations. There you go. If I hover over them, you can see that they change a different color of blue. And let's change this text color right here to white so they show up a little bit better. So it's not the prettiest thing on earth, but it's getting better. Now let's focus in on the main content of our page. Throw in some padding on this guy. Let's float everything in main to the left side of the screen like we covered previously. And then let's make the width 600 pixels. I can see things are floating a little bit better. If you look over here on the right side of your screen, you're going to see sidebar items. Let's say I want those to line up a little bit better. Let's just keep those on the screen like that. I can target sidebar, throw in some padding. Let's float that to the right side of the screen. Since the main content area is floated to the left, define a width of 150 pixels to accommodate those size. Let's just set our height to auto, and let's give it a different background color to make it stand out a little bit. And if we bounce over here, you can see that the sidebar item has been added in. Now let's bounce over here and see what else we can play around with. There's an H2 tag. Let's say I want to change the size of that. Of course, I can just type in H2, change font size to 1EM. Looks a little bit nicer. Focus in on this first paragraph right here. Play around with text align and word spacing. So that again is going to be a ID. So I just put a hash symbol in there. Text align, and let's make that left. And this is either going to align the text to the left, center, or the right. And then word spacing is going to define the size of the space between our words. So let's say we change that to 0.5 EM. And watch how that changes. See how the words are more spread out? Left align isn't going to do anything because it already was a left align by default. We could go and change this to target the second paragraph and align it to the right. Get rid of the word spacing so you can see the difference. See? A little bit tighter. Go in here to paragraph 3. Text align to the center. Now that's to the center. This is to the right. See? We could also indent. So let's throw this in there for the fourth paragraph. And let's do a text indent of 2EM. Watch this guy right here. See how it indented? We could also change letter spacing, which is going to change the space between letters. Let's do this to paragraph 5. Letter spacing. Change that to 0.5 EM. Now you can see how much bigger that is. Here we have our footer down here. If we want to make sure that nothing is going to show up next to our footer, let's go in here, type in clear. That guarantees nothing is going to butt up next to our footer. Change the background to black so that shows up a little bit better. Text color, let's change this to white. Change the padding to 10 pixels all around. Reload. There it is. Now we can play around with these different guys over here, these different list items. There are numerous different list items you can use. You can use circle, disk, lower Latin, lower Greek, upper Latin, upper Greek, square, or you could use a URL like this, and then whatever your picture name is, ping like that, and then put this inside of quotes. Let's go in here and change this. Let's target the sidebar, which is the name, sidebar list. Change the list style type, change it to lower Latin, and you can also define how the list markers should be set up inside of the list item content boxes. By default, the list item, this guy right here, is set up to be outside of the position when the list items are displayed on a screen. Here, I'll show you. List style, position, let's do outside, and then we'll do inside for the other one so that you can see the difference. Sidebar list 2, it's going to be the guy underneath of it. Let's set this for inside. And then we'll change this to upper Roman just to cover something else. See? When you have it inside, that is basically, you can see that the difference between the distance there and the distance there and how that lines up. So inside, make sure that those list items are bounced inside so that they line up that way. And otherwise, if you list them as outside, they're going to be outside of the box. Something that's just used for basic alignment. Another thing we can do is we can target that we want certain data to show up before elements, and so let's say for this paragraph here we wanted to put a star before the paragraph begins. We're going to say paragraph, and then para-1 is its name, and before it, if we want to slip some content inside of there, we can say content. I'm going to be using this a lot, and let's say I wanted to put a star inside of there. Now you can see the star shows up right there. I could also do a very similar thing, have it show up after any element. So again, for the paragraph, at the very end of it, if I want to slip content inside of it, let's say I want to put an @ symbol for some strange reason, and now you're going to see an @ symbol shows up right there. Another thing we could do is auto-generate numbered content. So let's say we have all these different lists right here. We want to auto-generate a number that's going to appear before those. Well, I know this guy, favorite movies, is an H3 tag. Bounce over here and just look at that. Yep, you can see this is an H3 tag, and this is an H3 tag, and these are all H4 tags. So what I'm going to do is I have these set up so that I can number them because they all share a common element type. I said I'd be covering just about everything. So here we go, H3 tag. Let's go font size, and let's make this 9EM first. Then I have to define the name for the variable that's going to increment, and in this situation I'm going to give it the name of num. And you're going to see here in a second how this works out. I'm going to do a very similar thing for all the H4 tags. Once again, these are the H3 tags, favorite movies and others, and then these are the H4 tags, all these lists inside of there. You'll see how they number. And let's just change the font size again, just so that they show up a little bit different. So 0.7 EM. I have to give it a new counter increment name. And in this one, I'm going to call it sub. And let's say that I want them to increment by 2. I would do that. They increment by 1 by default. I'm just doing this just to have things show up a little bit different. Then I have to actually define how they're going to work. So again, I want to target before the H3 tag. So I go before, like that. And then if I want to slip content inside of there, I go content, and then I go counter, like this. And then the number I want to show up inside of there. And then if I want to put space there, can do that. And then I can do a very similar thing for the H4 tag to generate or auto-generate numbered content. Change that to H4 before. And I'm going to say number dot period right there. And then counter. And if I want to get the value, it's in sub. And then put a space after that. Do that. And reload. You're going to see what it does. See? Auto-generated that 1. And then you can see that these are incrementing by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. It's just something a little bit weird that might come in handy. Another thing we can do, there are numerous what are called CSS facado classes. I'm going to show you a couple of them right here. And they basically are going to allow us to style individual weird elements. So let's come in here. Let's say inside of paragraph 2, I want to have the first letter be capitalized or larger than all the rest. I can do that. So I just have to target paragraph 2, right like this. And if I want to target the first letter, I can do so. And then I can say font size, and let's say I want it to be bigger than it is. Let's change that to 25 points. And there you can see the I grew in size. Show you a couple more of these. Let's say in paragraph 3, the first line, and this is going to be the first line. It's not going to be up until a period or anything. Let's say I want this to be set to a background color of yellow. I can do that. Boom, see, change to yellow. I can even color in the first child span inside of a document, or the first of anything inside of an element. So if I wanted to target, let's say, a span that is the first child inside of an argument or inside of a document, I just say, there you are, span first child. And I can change the background color again. In this situation, let's say that we want it to be orange. And there you can see, covered up the very first span in the document orange. I could also select every paragraph element that is the last child of its parent by going paragraph, last child. You can do this for any of the elements. Last child, change that color, reload. And there you can see, went and got the last child paragraph, colored it that tan color. And these just go on and on forever. I'll show you this one. This is going to allow us to check these or select the second child span. So nth child, 2. And of course you can put 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to put inside of there. And you can see it went and colored this guy that same tan color we had before. Let's say you wanted to have a hover effect on all of your H3 tags so that whenever they're hovered over, they change to orange for some reason. You can do that. So it's not just tied to links. You can do it to any of your different elements as long as you target them. Another thing that's kind of neat is we can change our cursor. So let's look at something here. Here we go. We have a span with the idea of common quote. Whenever we put our mouse over that, we're going to have the cursor change. So we'll call this common quote. Change the cursor to a pointer. And there you can see, whenever I put my cursor over that, it changes, right like this. And the different cursors that are available to you are pointer, crosshair, move, text, wait, progress, help. And of course, you're also going to be able to define your custom cursors. So whatever that is, right like that with a URL if you'd like to. Another thing we could do is draw a box around an element. So let's say the fourth paragraph we have here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say I wanted to draw a box around that. Just target that 4 like this. Call outline. Say I want it to be 2 pixels and let's make it solid blue. And there you can see it's outlined. You could also come in and draw a border in a very similar fashion. So for paragraph 5, let's do border instead. 2 pixels, solid, and let's make it black this time. Reload it. There you can see how that shows up. And let's do something a little bit neat. Let's go and create some buttons. Okay, so as you can see right here, I have a list called buttons, and each one of them has a class of site button, and I'm also going to do sort of a slideshow type of thing over here to demonstrate some other effects you can have. So I'm going to target the buttons list that I have there, and let's go and give them a width of 150 pixels, like that. Target a specific item with the class name of site button, like that. You can do text align. You can do anything. text align with that, of course. Let's make it center. Say I want to give it a margin bottom of 5 pixels so that those are divided up. And then let's say that I want to come in and specifically target the links inside of those and have those displayed as block elements. And let's say that I want the color on that to be white for those buttons. And of course we want to get rid of the text decoration because we don't want those to be underlined. Custom style for the link. Let's have this be background set for blue, and then also give it a border of 5 pixels, solid blue. And then whenever it's hovered over, just paste that in there, site button A, hover. Let's change the background color on this again. I don't know, something that'll really show up like green. And let's let the border be the same. Paste that in there. And there you can see are the little links, little menus, and whenever you hover over them, they change to green. So that's sort of a way of making buttons. And I have these little pictures down here. Let's turn these into a sort of like a slideshow type of thing so that whenever we hover over these different images, they'll show up. So we'll go DL and kids pics like this. And if we look at them over here, there's kid pics. And I have a list, and then each of the list items is going to contain an image with a width and a height. These are going to be the thumbnails, and also are going to contain another image. It's going to be the larger version. I give this the class of hidden, and they're all going to be hidden by default. You're going to see here exactly how that works out. A image hidden. Let's go and find the visibility so that they do not show up by default. They're only going to show up whenever we hover over the smaller items. Position. And let's say we want this to be absolute. Make sure we spell it right. Position it from the left, 110 pixels. So we're only going to be positioning the large items, and they're going to be hidden by default. And then top, I don't know what this is going to be. Let's make it like 400 pixels. We'll see what it looks like later. And then if we want them to show up whenever the link is hovered over, that's the little thumbnail. We just go visibility and make it visible. Where does it show up at? And here you can see there is the image. There it shows up right there. We would want this to be lined up down here, of course. But if we hover over it, you can see how the pictures change. So just trying to show you everything humanly possible. Now we can see some examples of text decoration. Here's underline, and of course this would be underlined. This would be lined through, just like we have there. There's overline and lowercase. These were previously uppercase, as you can see if we come over here. See? Lowercase, and we change them to lowercase. Uppercase is going to make all the letters uppercase, and capitalize is just going to capitalize the first letter, as you can see there. So there is text decoration, underline, line through, overline, and text transform, lowercase, uppercase, and capitalize. Now we'll go in here and we'll preserve any white space that we have in these guys. You can see here the white space is not preserved, and here, see, there's white space here. So let's go and fix that. It's actually kind of easy to do. We just go and type in the ID name, and that is whitespace -pre. And if we want to preserve the white space, just go white space like this and pre. And it does exactly what you would think it would do. We could also set this up so that the white space will collapse. However, there will not be any line breaks unless you actually put a line break inside of it. And that's white space and no wrap. So basically no wrap is going to say that we're not going to have line breaks. And if you watch this guy, you're going to see that that happens. See? It goes on forever and ever and ever. We could, of course, preserve the wrap by typing pre-wrap in there for white space and reloading it. And as you can see right there, there's white space and it's also going to wrap. And lastly, we're going to also be able to define how our text is laid out. So let's say we want to go from left to right. We would define direction like this and just type in LTR, left to right. And also we could go in and do a similar thing. In this situation, we're going to call this right dash left, and then here this will be RTL, and you can see that that worked as well. Now let's go in and edit some tables so that we just have the tables on the screen, and let's define some generic table properties here. Give it a width of 600 pixels. We can define where we want our caption to show up, so caption side, and we'll have this be top. We can define text alignment and have this be center, so every column is centered. And let's define a border as well, make it solid and black. Reload, and you can see all of the tables have been set that way. We could of course come in and add some borders. This will affect everything, of course, every table anyway. 2 pixels solid and black. Now you can see all those different parts are going to be bordered. And we could also give everything a fixed size, the table layout fixed, like that. And you can also see that this shows up even though there's no information in that specific table. While this guy right here is fixed, and no matter how big the text is inside of here, it's going to remain fixed. However, for the table right here, let's go down so you can see here there's nothing in there. If we want specifically to have that collapse, what we're going to do is say table spacing is the ID for that, and we could go border spacing 10 pixels and 15 pixels. And in this situation, border spacing is going to apply 10 pixels of space on the left and right and 15 pixels on the top and the bottom. And then we can also say that we want to hide anything that's empty. So empty cells and hide. And then we could also collapse our border. So border, collapse, and then just type in collapse. And you watch the change. And there you can see it. So there's a couple different ways to play around with tables. Now I'm going to be playing around with some divs. As you can see right here, we just have some blocks inside of here, and these are all just divs. That's it. And we're going to style them to add in some different blurring effects and so forth and so on. So I went and created some generic divs right here, some borders and so forth. Let's go in and do like a drop shadow effect on this div. And to do that, you just go box, shadow, like that. And you're going to have your horizontal position, the offset. So I'm going to go 5 pixels to the right, 5 pixels down. The blur amount, I'll just have that be 5 pixels. Size of my shadow, let's say 2 pixels. And the color that I want to use for it, I'm going to say gray. And you can see that that shows up right there. Let's go and do a couple more of these. This one's going to be div 2. This time I'm going to create an inner shadow. So we can pretty much leave everything exactly the same, except I'm going to say inset like that. And there's an inner shadow. And then also, let's say we want to do like a glow effect. Well, what we would do with that is say div 3, and we would set both of these to 0. So the first two are going to be 0, and this is going to give like a glow effect because there's not going to be an offset. We can change this to 10 pixels to make that sure that shows up, and change this to 5 pixels. Again, these are the same. This is going to be the blur amount, and this is going to be the size of the shadow. And I guess a yellow would look better as a glow effect. So there we are, and reload. And there you can see it sort of glows. Now let's go in and add a drop shadow to this text right here. Went and automatically created this and added in a font just to shave a little bit of time. I can just go div 4, and here we want to use a text shadow. And again, we're going to say, let's say 2 pixels to the right, 2 pixels down, 3 pixels is going to represent the blur amount. And then let's say we also want that to be gray. And while we're inside of here, let's also go and define div 4 or div 5 in this situation, text shadow as well. And if I want to add a glow effect, I'll just turn these to 0. See, there's no inset, and change this to yellow. There we are, and reload, and there you can see is the drop shadows and the glow. Now let's mess around with RGB colors. Once again, the only thing I did here was floated everything to the left, and here I am going to define my background, but instead of using hash codes, I'm going to use RGB, red, green, blue. If I want a red of 0, just put 0, and this is going to give me a bluish color. I could also come in here and change the opacity for the next one in line. So just do this and change this to 7 and change this to 8. We're going to do all of them, of course. If I want to change the opacity to this, I can actually do it in a couple different, well, 2 different ways. There's opacity. Let's say I want it to be 50%. There it is. Now it's 50%. And I could also go RGBA, alpha, opacity, same sort of thing. And here, change that to 5 and reload it. And now you can see how those show up. Let's go and also do something similar with hue, saturation, and lightness. Let's change this to 9. Change this to hue, saturation, lightness. 205, bluish type of color, 100%. Set the lightness to 50%. Also be able to add alpha into this for the next one. So let's say we want that to be 50% alpha or opacity, and reload it. And there you're going to see all those different colors. For the next one, I'm going to set it up so that we can actually round the corners. I previously had this all marked off. Let's go and get rid of this. And let's round the corners on these divs, as well as create circles and tabs. Do that, we just go div 11, and then we're going to go border radius and change this to 30 pixels. That's going to create a round rectangle. And if you round it enough, it's actually going to look like a circle. So just change that to 50. And then for this last one, let's say we want to just round one corner, we would go border, say we want to do the top right radius, and then let that be 30 pixels. And there you can see that's exactly what they did. Now for the next one, I'm actually going to put a background image inside of here. So background image, said I would cover this in the past, so URL, and I have NTT logo, ping, like that. Could also layer the backgrounds. So let's say we want div 14, and we could do that with background size, And let's say that we wanted our image to be 200%. So we say 200%, both horizontal and vertical. And then let's say that we also want it to be 50. So that it's going to have multiple versions of that background image squashed in there at 50%. And change this to 15 and reload. And you can see there it zoomed in at 200, and there it fit my background image in 4 times because I divided it up 50%. Okay, so now we're going to get into some fun things. We're going to talk about gradients and animations and interacting with different elements on your screen. And as you can see, I'm in CSS Tut 8.html right here and stylesheet 8.css if you want to get these and play around with them on your own. I just have a whole bunch of divs over in the HTML file. What we're going to be getting into are some odd types of different ways of using CSS3 that are implemented different in different browsers. And you can see here our browser prefixes. Moz is for Firefox, MS is for Internet Explorer, O is for Opera, and WebKit is for both Chrome and Safari. And I created a generic div here with height and weight and margins and borders, and you can see them over here. And the very first thing I'm going to do is create a gradient. And you can see here all of the different prefixes for all of the different browsers. And to create a gradient, what you would define is the direction the gradient's going to be going in. This is 45 degrees. And then you're going to have color stops. And it's going to shift between red, yellow, and blue. And if we save that and reload it, you can see there's your gradient. Now you can also define that your direction is going to come in a different way, meaning that you'll be able to define the direction as left, right, top, or bottom. And you're still going to use the same exact color stops. And here you can see if I want to go from the left top like that, I can do so and save it and reload it, and now it goes in the opposite direction. Another way we could do gradients, and I just wanted to go through this really quickly, is you can also define how much of the total space each of the gradients is going to take up, so 20, 30, and 60. And no, those don't need to add up to 100, and you can just play around with them until you get the type of gradient you're looking for. And another thing we can do with gradients is actually repeat the gradient over and over again so that it looks sort of like a cylinder type of shape. And in that situation, you would put repeating linear like this instead of regular linear like that. Again, I'm going to define I start in the left top, and then here I'm dividing up all the space between the different color stops. And if we reload that, you're going to see that it has sort of like that cylinder type of look as well. And then the final gradient we'll look at are actually radial gradients. And you define those by typing in radial gradient instead of linear gradient. And again, I'm dividing those colors up based off of just arbitrary numbers. Let's save that and reload it. And there you can see your radial gradient, which is a little bit scary looking. So there's different ways that we can play around with gradients and put them in backgrounds inside of divs, and you can use them for a whole bunch of other different things. And now I'm going to go in and actually show you how you can interact with your different elements to make them scale and skew and move and do things like that. So let's start off with a basic scale. And again, we're just going to type in our prefix right here with transform, and then follow that up with scale by 2. So we're going to say that we want our element to scale by 2, and specifically when we hover over it, so you can see there it went and it's scaled. I could probably move it and that would look a little bit nicer, but either way, that is how we can scale. We can also similarly come in here and rotate. Let's say I want to rotate this item 45 degrees whenever I hover over it. You can see that's still scaling, and this is rotating 45 degrees. And of course, you can rotate it any way that you would like. We can also come in and skew items, and here we'll have a skewing based off of the X direction, and here based off of the Y direction. Like I said, play around with these things. That would be the best way to learn how they work, and you can see exactly how we can skew our item. And then we could also come in and move the item. So here I'm going to translate or move it 20 pixels to the right and 20 pixels down. And you can see it's moving 20 pixels to the right and 20 pixels down. And next what we're going to do is sort of animate a cube. There you can see a rectangle or a square that we have over here, and we're going to make the edges round and at the same time change the color. And you can see I just have a basic div here with all these different things here. And you can define how you want to transition from one thing to the next. And what we're going to be transitioning to is a background of red from orange. And then the border radius is also going to change. And of course you can play around and change all these things, and please do that. It's a lot of fun actually. Then what we need to do is define exactly how we want to ease from the orange and regular old square to the rounded edge square and the color red. How we do that is with the prefix followed by transition, and then the period of time we're going to take to transition, and then how exactly we're going to transition. And you can see the different types of transitions you have right there. And you can see if I go and save that and reload this, we're going to change the red and also round the edges. That's kind of a simple animation, so now we'll look at a little bit more complicated. In this one, again, we're going to have a basic div right here, and then we'll be changing a whole bunch of different things here. We're going to be moving this guy around on the screen, and how you do that is, in this situation, we're going to use a WebKit way of creating keyframes, and then a standard old syntax for creating keyframes as well. And we're going to start this off with @ and then we're going to define all of the keyframes. So from the 0 point to 25 to 50 to 75 to 100. And from each transition, we're going to change the background color. So this is going to be the first transition, and we're going to start off with red. Then we're going to slowly transition to change the background color to yellow. We're going to move it to the right 200 pixels, and then we're going to move it to the right 200 pixels and down 200 pixels, changing the color and so forth and so on. We're doing exactly the same thing down here, and we're giving it the name example. And you can see example where that shows up right there. Then all we need to do is define the duration of the complete animation and the delay before the animation starts. And you're going to do that the same no matter what type of animation you are doing. So after we have that set up, we can save it and reload, and you're going to see that there it moves. Whoop, went off the screen, and then it came back down. So we could come in here if we wanted to make it go down instead of going up. We can change this to positive 200 and do the same exact thing right here. Positive 200 and reload it. And there's a 2-second delay, as you can see. Moves over, moves down, moves left, and moves back to its current position. So there's a look at a bunch of different ways we can animate and interact with different elements using cascading style sheets. And to clean up everything and finish up everything, I'd like to talk for a second about using alternative style sheets. We're also really a common thing to be used. We're going to here define our default style, and you can see basically what we're focusing in on are mobile or handheld, and then a printable version for your website, as well as a large text format for people that might have trouble seeing. And this is all we're going to do. We're going to define a different media type. We're going to give it a different title that the user will be able to switch between. And then, of course, point at a different style sheet for each of the different options. So now let's continue on here. And basically what I'm going to do is show you different ways to sort your content into different columns. This is pretty much the final thing we would want to look at here. So what we have here is lorem ipsum text over here. And we have a basic height, width, border, and overflow in this situation is saying that if the text is bigger than the area that we are defining for the element that it's going to contain, we want the overflow to be hidden. And you can see right there that that indeed is happening. Now let's say that we wanted to create some column blocks that are going to take all this information and sort it inside of those columns. Again, we're going to be using the different prefixes for the different browsers, and let's say we want to take all of the content that is in the ID of lorem and sort it between 4 different columns. This is how we would do that. And we could bounce over here and reload it, and you're going to see indeed that it went and sorted all that information. If we stretch this out, there you can see 4 columns. And anything that goes beyond that point, of course, is going to be hidden because overflow is marked as hidden. We could also come in here and define, let's say we wanted to have lines between all of this different content. Well, we could go lorem again and define that we want little rules that are going to be dashed in black and 2 pixels wide with column rule, right like this. And reload it, and you can see that those little lines go in there. Another thing we can do, we have these guys down here, so let's bounce over for a second just to look at what we got. Here we have a bunch of divs. We have a big div called container, and then we have 3 different divs inside of there. We're going to be able to define the amount of space taken up by the elements in the containing element that we have here. And we're going to be able to do that by bouncing over here and defining our containers, height and width and border. And then we're going to define the container as a WebKit box. And this is going to create what are called flexible boxes for our content. Then what we just need to do is focus in on the divs that are inside of this main container div and define exactly, I'm just going to use WebKit here just to keep this simple because I'm using Chrome, but you could of course use the other ones. and we'll define this div right here specifically is going to take up 2 of whatever the total space is, and then we're going to do that for the other divs as well. So let's bounce in there, change this to 2 and change this to 3, and then let's say we want this to be 2 and this to be 3. This is going to take up the larger part of it, and file and save it and reload, and there you can see exactly how all of that space is divvied up between all of the different divs. So there's a run through of pretty much everything you could ever want to know about cascading style sheets, part 3. Hope you guys enjoyed this. This is a really crazy tutorial that I didn't even know if it would ever work out. But either way, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.